Hi class, thanks for tuning back into this second video. This is the second of two videos that you need to watch for this second weekend, and like I said before, these videos are mandatory for your homework, and the reason we do them is so that everyone has the same basic understanding when they come into class, so we can really focus on the harder problems. Alright, so you just took notes on segment addition, so you want to either flip the page or turn to the next page and label the top of it Unit 1, Section 1.4, Angles. At the top right hand corner of this page, you want to write a number 3 to signify that this is your third set of notes. Your objectives for this set of notes are listed on the slideshow. We will be talking about both of these objectives, so if you need to pause the slide, you can, but I'm going to move forward. Okay, so angle. This is your first vocabulary term. We're going to have about 4 or 5 vocabulary terms you need to go over. So your first one is angle, and basically there's an example drawn of the angle below. It's a figure formed by two rays with the same endpoint. Where you see that gray dot, your gray dot is your vertex. So this gray dot right here is your vertex. And that's basically the endpoint where the two rays meet. And then just remember that degrees is the units that we measure our angles in. Alright, how we label it. So the way we label our angles are by 3 ways. We can either label it by just its vertex. So you'll notice that in this angle, its vertex is point Z. So what we could label this angle is angle Z. Okay, that's our first way that we could label it. Alright, you do want to write down the 3 ways you can label it. So you want to write vertex only. Alright, the second way we can label it is by the points on the rays and the vertex, keeping in mind that the vertex needs to be in the center. So we could label it either SZT or TZS. So we would write SZT or TZS. Okay, that's your second way you could label it. And then your third is by the number. So you'll notice that there's a number 3 drawn in this diagram at its vertex, so it would also be angle 3. Always, always, always draw your angle symbol, okay? This is your angle symbol. Get used to drawing it because it will help you in your problems if you can recognize it very quickly, and it also helped me to understand what you're talking about when you are answering questions for me. Alright, angle classifications. These should be very, very familiar. You've probably had these drilled into your head all through middle school. You still want to write all 4 of these definitions down. So if you need to pause the slide, go ahead and pause the slides right now, but you do need to write these 4 terms down. Alright, and then finally congruent angles. So we talked about congruent segments being segments that have the same length. When we have 2 angles with the same degree measure, we say that they are congruent. And let me demonstrate real quick what congruent angles would be marked with. So if you ever see something that looks like this, let's just say we're dealing with a triangle, and we have these angles right up here, and we see these little arc marks. That means that those 2 angles are congruent. Additionally, you could see something like this, double arcs, and that just means that these 2 angles are also congruent to each other. Okay. So here is a protractor. So we'll go into more detail in class about how to use a protractor, but basically what you want is you always want one of the rays of your angle to be at the 0 degree mark and the other ray to be somewhere along the curved edge of the protractor. And you'll notice that there's 2 values for each number. Like right here it says 70 and 110. What you need to pay attention to is if this is whether or not the angle is obtuse or acute. So right here, it looks like the angle is falling in between 50 and 60, or 130 and 120. So it could either be 55 or 125. What we need to do is we need to pay attention to the size of this angle. This angle could not be acute because it definitely is larger than a right angle. So we need to pick the obtuse measurement, and that means that this angle right here is going to be a 125 degree angle. Okay, and then lastly, angle addition postulate. This is very similar to the segment addition postulate. Basically, all it's saying is you can add 2 angles to get one larger angle. So right here, we're adding RZS and SZT to get that larger angle of RZT. You do need to write this down. If you need to pause the video, pause the video. Okay, our first example of angle addition postulate. So, like I said, we would be going through some numerical examples so that you would understand what's going on. In this diagram, we've got angle AOC, and we see that ray B is cutting into this angle, and we need to figure out what is that total angle AOC if we know AOB and BOC. So, we know that AOB, which is the yellow angle, measures 64 degrees. We also know that BOC measures 42 degrees. So, we are going to use our angle addition postulate and say that the measure of angle AOB plus the measure of angle BOC equals the measure of angle AOC. And I have to stress the importance of writing out the actual angle addition postulate so that when I'm looking through your work, I can understand where your thought process began. So you always, always, always want to write this step right here. Okay, always start with this step. Next, we want to plug in what we know. We know that AOB is 64 degrees. Okay, so AOB is 64. I'm going to plug in 64. I know that BOC is 42 degrees, so I'm going to write 42. And we are still trying to figure out the measure of angle AOC. I'm going to simplify the left side, and I get that 64 plus 42 equals 106. So in the end, I get that the measure of angle AOC is 106 degrees. Boop. Don't forget your degree symbol. Alright, so that example seemed like it was pretty easy, so we're going to move on to an example that uses some algebra. So you do want to copy this example down. This is your example. We're going to label this example 2. The last one should have been example 1. So this is your example 2. And what we are given is an angle, we're given 3 angles. So there's angle WXZ and ZXY, and then also WXY. Alright, and let me just copy this down onto my whiteboard real quick. Okay. So what we're also given is that WXY, the bigger angle, is equal to 160 degrees. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our angle addition postulate and say that the measure of, and I'll highlight it in red, so this angle right here, so the measure of angle WXZ plus the measure of, and I'll highlight this in blue, ZXY equals the measure of WXY, or the bigger angle that equals 160 degrees. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to substitute what we know. So we know that WXZ is 7x minus 4. So I'm going to write 7x minus 4 plus 5x plus 8 equals 160. Next, what we want to do is we want to do our algebra. So we need to combine our like terms. And if we combine 7x and 5x, we get 12x. And negative 4 and positive 8 come together to make positive 4, all together equaling 160 degrees. Your next step in the algebra is to subtract 4 from both sides, and you get 12x equals 156. Now we need to divide by 12, and we get that x equals 13. However, we are not done. The problem asked us to find what is the measure of WXZ and ZXY. So we do need to go back, just like we did in that last problem, and we need to plug back in. So what we're going to do is we need to recopy out our equations, and I'm going to say, I'll write in red, and I'll say 7 times 13 minus 4. Okay, 7 times 13 equals 91, and we gotta subtract 4, we get 87. Okay, and then I'll write the other one in blue, and I'll say 5 times 13 plus 8. And 5 times 13 is 65, plus 8, we get 73. Now to check that we've done this all correct, we want to add our angles back up together. So we get 87 plus 73. When I add those two together, I get 160. Okay, so we've done this problem correctly. Alright, and you are done for this video. Congratulations on making it through your second week of school and your first set of video notes. Posted on the PowerPoint is your SAT, ACT problem of the week. Remember that if you bring in the work you've done for these problems and you've gotten the answer correct, we will give you extra credit on your quiz for the week. So please remember that if you do work these problems out, to bring in the work to class. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.